Hello, fellow classmates. My name is Monica DeWong, and I'm very excited to be presenting to you my capstone research project. We're going to be discussing the relationship between servant leadership and AMR employees. Now, let's get started. Throughout this master's program, I learned of various leadership styles, but one that really captured my attention was servant leadership. This project and study focuses on a company called Advanced Medical Reviews, AMR, which is an evolving business, which means, they're acquiring new clients. This company is requiring a higher level of engagement and performance from their employees to match their business model. Now, with any changes, it can cause an employee to become anxious, doubtful, and there can be times of mistrust. So this research project focuses on AMR utilizing servant-based methods to get their employees more engaged and to foster a relationship of leader-employee trust. Now, you may be asking yourself, what is servant leadership? The theory of servant leadership represents an important step towards balancing the needs of both leaders and employee as they work towards fulfilling organizational goals. So before we dive any further, let's talk about servant leadership and what that is. So Robert Greenleaf in 1977 captured the essence of servant leadership for a modern audience. He posed the question, who is the servant leader? In his writing, he stated, the servant leader is a servant first. It begins with the natural feeling that one wants to serve first. The conscious choice brings one to aspire to lead. That person is sharply different from one who is a leader first. Now, what that basically means is that before the leader is a leader, they are a servant first. So now let's discuss the components that make up the servant leadership model. The first one is active listening. Active listening is the ability for the leader to ensure there is comprehension and alignment. The next component is empathy. This is the leader's ability to understand and share the feelings of another. Emotional healing is the leader's ability to create an environment or a culture that allows individuals to recover from the adversity or stress they are facing in their lives. Next, there is persuasive mapping. This is the ability for the leader to engage individuals in the overall vision of the organization by integrating an understanding of the impact they can make within their daily responsibilities and activities to overall goals. The last leadership component is stewardship. Now, this is the passion a leader displays in wanting to create a positive impact on society as a whole. It is also a factor of organizational stewardship, which is a reflection of the leader's ability to create a sense of community within the organization. In order to understand the relationship of servant leadership factors, reviewing influential and recent work on the style is imperative. Literature review helps build a solid ground for the study to determine the relationship that servant leaders have on employee engagement and trust. The listed literature are related to factors that have significant impact on employee engagement and trust to leadership, such as psychological fit and leadership effectiveness. According to Kellerman, the leadership industry was based on the belief that leading is a path to power and money, achievement, and a tool for creating change. However, there are other realities to leadership. Research began to emerge and started exploring personal characteristics and psychological traits that assist in defining the leader. Fred Friedler was a scholar who had a major interest in interpersonal perception, a subject he pursued first in terms of therapeutic relationships and later in leadership. There was recognition for the need for a more stable theoretical structure to leadership. Friedler articulated the major outlines of a contingency theory, which focused on identifying what traits one had, identified the situation, and determined the most effective style to use to address the situation or individual. This was the basic concept which identified that not one leadership style works for every situation, whether it was contingent on the situation as well as the individual's need. Steed indicated there are different competencies and technical skills needed to engage employees through the marketplace, leadership behaviors are the key components to organizational success. Politis outlined a study that focused on ethical leadership styles, which found that 59% of the variance in the performance of the organization was attributed to either authentic or servant leaders, Now, Spears dedicated his research by outlining 10 essential traits of servant leadership that was defined in Greenleaf's work, which includes listening, empathy, awareness, persuasion, and stewardship. Spears wrote about the organizational shift where leaders was once thought of employees as a mean of productivity and profit, whereas now employees are engaged in the strategy of creating a lasting impact. Now let's take a look at the methodology, research, and design. Most leadership studies focus on understanding the role and power position of the leaders and managers. There have been very little research dedicated to the understanding the effect the leadership style, servant leadership, has on the team and individual success. The key individuals in this study include AMR staff members in the operations, client associate, client services, and support department, as well as AMR supervisors and vice president of operations. The variables in this study include employee and leadership relationship, employee engagement, job satisfaction, loyalty, and trust. Now, an online survey was conducted amongst a randomized sample of 40 AMR staff members from amongst a population of 90. Participants were informed that the survey will ask them to provide answers to questions about servant leadership behaviors that are commonly practiced in their workforce. There were no qualification requirements to participate in the survey, as anyone can participate in the service regardless of their formal title, position, or situation in life. The survey responses were anonymous and participants were not asked to provide their name. Participation was not mandatory. The survey took about 5 minutes to complete. In addition, they were informed that AMR was not sponsoring this survey, as it would be used for academia purposes only. The completion of the survey implied their consent to participate in the survey. The interview questionnaire came from the Modern Servant Leader Resource Center, which was based on Larry Spears' 10 attributes of servant leadership, which consisted of 18 questions. A 19th question was created, which asked the participant if they believed the thesis of this study was true to their workplace. Do you believe that servant leadership plays a role in the relationship of trust among employee to leader at AMR? The purpose of the interview questionnaire was to evaluate their servant leadership attributes. Each participant was asked to evaluate themselves and to be honest about their responses. They were asked to not respond with how they would like to act, but with how they actually act. Each question included examples of servant leadership in action. The entire assessment took about an hour to complete. Now, let's take a look at the results and research findings. The purpose of this quantitative study was to identify the relationship that servant leaders have on employee trust at AMR. This section will include a summary of the descriptive statistics and detailed findings of the data related to the hypothesis. The final piece includes a review of the theoretical model as it relates to the servant leadership factors and drivers of leader-employee trust. Leaders are challenged with maintaining a balance between keeping their employees informed with the entire truth and withholding information that includes certain realities. Oftentimes, we find that leaders are being placed in uncomfortable situations and moral dilemmas because they are attempting to salvage their own jobs while trying to maintain trust of their employees. This study focused on servant leadership and the role it plays among employee and leader trust at AMR. The theory of servant leadership represents an important step towards balancing the needs of both employees and leaders as they work towards fulfilling the organizational goals. The Employee Assessment Survey and the Leader Self-Assessment scores had a significant correlation. AMR employees all perceived and agreed that their leaders carry servant leadership qualities and traits. AMR employees who participated in the survey scored their leaders high in all servant leader areas. all above 4 on a scale that maxes at 5. When AMR employees were asked if they perceive their leaders as individuals who are empathetic towards their staff members, nearly 92% of them either agreed or strongly agreed. No staff members disagreed or strongly disagreed with the statement that their leaders empathize with coworkers who are struggling. It is notable that no staff members believe their leaders are unaccepting of others and their imperfections. Most employees see their leaders as individuals with an altruistic calling. Now let's take a look at the findings for emotional healing and active listening. Here, no staff members disagreed or strongly disagreed that AMR leaders do not practice active listening. Many of the staff members agreed that their leaders practice active listening when they are trying to learn things about themselves, and leaders also actively listen to the needs of others. When we surveyed employees regarding AMR leaders' awareness, many agreed their leaders practice awareness in order to have a more understanding of resolving issues, and they are aware of cultural differences among staff members. Only one staff member felt AMR leaders are not consciously aware of others, themselves, and cultural differences as well as perceptions. Persuasive mapping is a leader's ability to forecast the future and prepare an organization to sustain a course to achieve its goals. Even though there were a handful of employees, about 9, that disagreed, over 77% of AMR staff members agreed their leaders had the skills to persuasively map their ideas to their team. 16 individuals had neutral responses when asked if they felt AMR leaders seek to convince others rather than coerce compliance. Overall, staff members feel that their leaders take personal interest in suggesting and giving feedback they provide to assist with making their organizations better. Lastly, with regards to stewardship, servant leaders prepare individuals within an organization to sustain positive effects beyond the organization. One staff member felt AMR leaders do not try and improve the quality of their company for the good of those who will work after the individuals have left. All in all, many agreed that AMR leaders display the ability to prepare individuals to sustain positive effects beyond the organization. One way they do this is helping their staff members think and see the bigger picture by thinking beyond the day-to-day realities. The results of this study add a theoretical and practical contribution to the literature of servant leadership, employee engagement, and trust. Leaders in the organization need to exhibit servant leadership qualities and traits due to the significant influence that these have on the employee. The results also imply that servant leadership factors do have a positive impact on employee engagement and trust at AMR. Since the study has shown and proven the significance of a servant leader to employee relationship, it is important for leaders to know what behaviors they exhibit in the workplace that builds engagement and trust and create an environment where the employee's perception of servant leadership fit drives that trust. Leaders at AMR should take note of this study as it shows building a foundation of trust within each employee has a multitude of factors. Conclusion and recommendation. The Employee Assessment Survey and the Leader Self-Assessment scores had a significant correlation. AMR employees all perceived and agreed that their leaders carry servant leadership qualities and traits. AMR employees who participated in the survey scored their leaders high in all servant leader areas, all above 4 on the scale that maxes at 5. Leaders who took the self-assessment all scored very high as well. Their average scores were about 86%, which placed them in the servant leadership category. 100% of AMR leaders agreed and recognized that having a servant leadership-based relationship plays an impact on employee leader trust. If the employee perceives the leader as a servant leader, then it is important to continue to build upon those relationships by utilizing servant leadership components that will help drive that relationship. AMR can use these findings to refocus their training on building and fostering a culture of servant leadership factors for their leaders if they wish to build trust within individuals and expand employees' perception of the organization in order to drive future engagement. And that concludes my research project on servant leadership and the impact it plays on employee leader trust at AMR. Thank you so much for listening and have a great day.